Red and blue lights carved through the Montana darkness like surgical blades. Deputy Marcus Walsh dragged Sarah Bennett from her SUV with enough force to split gravel under her boots. Cold steel kissed her throat as 3 more uniforms circled closer. "Women like you don't drive cars like this," Walsh sneered, his breath hot against her ear. Sarah Bennett, 31, exhausted from a double shift at Clearwater Regional Hospital in Ashford, Montana, stood perfectly still. What these deputies couldn't see beneath her scrubs and quiet demeanor was 8 years as an Army combat medic, 3 tours, evacuation units under fire, the kind of training that never left your nervous system. She raised her hand slowly, palms open. "You really don't want to do this," she said softly. Walsh laughed and reached for his taser. 3 seconds later, the roadside became a war zone. "Before we dive into what happened next, I need you to do something for me. Stay with Sarah's story until the very end, because what these officers started that night, they had no idea how to finish. Hit that like button. Drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. And let's get into it." The taser crackled 6 inches from Sarah's neck. Instinct older than her nursing career kicked in before thought could catch up. Her right hand deflected Walsh's wrist while her left drove into his solar plexus. Controlled, precise, just enough pressure to fold him over, gasping. The second deputy lunged. Sarah sidestepped, used his momentum against him, and guided him face first into the SUV's quarter panel. The metallic thud echoed across the empty highway. The third and fourth deputies froze, hands hovering over their weapons, suddenly uncertain. Sarah didn't move, didn't run. She stood there in the flashing lights, hands raised again, breathing steady. "I'm not resisting," she said clearly, "but I'm also not letting you hurt me." Deputy Walsh struggled to his feet, face purple with rage and humiliation. His hand went to his radio. "Officer needs assistance. Suspect is violent. Repeat, violent suspect." Sarah's stomach dropped. She knew what was coming. This wasn't de-escalation. This was escalation with backup. 15 minutes earlier, Sarah had been heading home from Clearwater Regional after a 14-hour shift in the emergency department. A domestic violence victim. 2 car accidents. 1 kid with meningitis. She'd held a mother's hand while they pronounced her husband dead from a heart attack. All she wanted was her apartment, a shower, and 8 hours of sleep before her next shift. The traffic stop came out of nowhere. No broken taillight, no speeding, just lights in her rear view and a sick feeling in her gut. She'd pulled over immediately, hands visible on the wheel, waiting. Walsh had approached like he was walking into a raid. "License and registration," he'd barked, flashlight aimed directly at her eyes. Sarah had handed them over without a word. "Step out of the vehicle." "Can I ask why I'm being stopped?" "Step out of the vehicle." That's when it started going wrong. What? Now, 6 additional patrol cars screamed onto the shoulder, blocking both lanes. Deputies poured out, hands on weapons, surrounding Sarah like she'd just robbed a bank. A tall man in a captain's uniform stepped through the circle. Victor Garrison. Sarah recognized him from the news, decorated officer, city council favorite, the face of Ashford law enforcement. Garrison surveyed the scene. Walsh still wheezing, another deputy holding his bleeding nose, Sarah standing perfectly still in the center. "You assaulted my officers," Garrison said. Not a question, a statement. "They assaulted me first," Sarah replied evenly. "I defended myself. There's a difference." Garrison smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "Get her in cuffs." 4 deputies moved in. Sarah didn't resist. She let them zip-tie her wrists behind her back, let them shove her into the back of a cruiser. Through the window, she watched Garrison talking to Walsh, both men gesturing, their body language all wrong for a standard arrest report. Walsh kept pointing at his throat. Garrison kept nodding. Sarah had seen enough combat zone cover-ups to recognize one forming in real time. Ashford County Jail smelled like industrial cleaner and old fear. They processed Sarah in silence. Fingerprints, mugshot, inventory of her belongings. Nobody read her rights. Nobody explained the charges. They threw her in a holding cell with concrete walls and a metal bench. Through the small window in the door, she could see deputies gathering in the hallway, talking in low voices. One of them caught her watching and smirked. An hour passed. Then 2. Sarah sat on the bench, running through everything that had happened. cataloging details. Times, names, badge numbers, the exact sequence of events. A female officer finally appeared, older, tired-looking, with sergeant stripes. "You get a phone call," she said, unlocking the door. Sarah stood slowly. "I want a lawyer." "You'll get one assigned tomorrow." "That's not how this works." The sergeant's expression flickered, something between sympathy and resignation. "It's how it works here." Sarah made the call anyway. The only lawyer she knew in Ashford was Rebecca Cross, who'd handled a medical malpractice consultation at the hospital 6 months ago. Sharp, skeptical, not afraid of a fight. Rebecca answered on the third ring. "This is Sarah Bennett. I was arrested tonight on Highway 12. I need representation." Rebecca's tone shifted immediately from annoyed to alert. "What's the charge?" "They haven't told me." Silence on the line. Then, "I'll be there in 20 minutes. Basek." Rebecca showed up in 19, briefcase in hand, looking like she'd expected this exact kind of mess. They gave her 10 minutes in a closet-sized consultation room. "Tell me everything," Rebecca said, pulling out a legal pad. Sarah walked through it chronologically, the stop, the escalation, the deputy's aggression, her defensive response, the way Garrison had orchestrated everything afterward. Rebecca's pen moved fast, underlining certain words. When Sarah finished, Rebecca leaned back. "They're going to charge you with assaulting an officer, probably resisting arrest, maybe vehicular something if they get creative." "I didn't assault anyone. I defended myself." "I believe you. The problem is, it's your word against 4 deputies and a captain. There were other drivers on the highway, witnesses, who probably kept driving because nobody stops to watch a police incident." Rebecca tapped her pen against the pad. "How bad did you hurt them?" "Walsh has bruised ribs. The other guy might have a broken nose. Nobody's seriously injured." "That'll help. But Sarah, you need to understand what you're up against. Victor Garrison has been with Ashford PD for 18 years. He's connected. City Council loves him. The mayor's office loves him. If he wants you buried, he has the pull to make it happen." Sarah met her eyes. "Then we don't let him." Rebecca studied her for a long moment. "You military?" "Army. Combat medic. Served in Afghanistan and Iraq." "That explains the training." Rebecca made another note. "It might also work against you. They'll paint you as unstable, PTSD, dangerous, former soldier who couldn't adjust to civilian life." "I've been a civilian for 6 years. I'm an ER nurse. I save lives." "I know, but they're going to twist it." Rebecca closed her notebook. "Here's what happens next. They'll arraign you tomorrow morning. I'll argue for release on your own recognizance. You have a job, community ties, no prior record. The judge should agree, but if Garrison pushes hard enough, we might be looking at bail." "How much?" "Depends on how scared they want you to be." They kept Sarah in holding overnight. She didn't sleep. Through the door, she could hear deputies talking, their voices low and careful. "Garrison wants the reports cleaned up before shift change." "Already done. Walsh's statement matches mine." "What about the dash cam?" "Technical malfunction. Happens all the time." Sarah pressed her ear closer to the gap. "Anyone check her background yet?" "Just the basics. No priors. Works at Clearwater Regional. Nothing interesting." Garrison said to make sure nothing interesting shows up. Footsteps approached. Sarah moved back to the bench, pulse steady, mind cataloging every word. They were erasing evidence before it could become a problem. Standard corruption, executed with the confidence of people who'd done it before. Morning arraignment happened in a cramped courtroom that smelled like old wood and stale coffee. Judge Patricia Harmon presided, 60-something, reading glasses perched on her nose, looking like she'd seen every variation of human stupidity the county could produce. The prosecutor, a young guy named Mitchell, stood and recited the charges. 2 counts of assault on a peace officer, resisting arrest, reckless endangerment. Rebecca stood immediately. "Your Honor, Ms. Bennett is a decorated Army veteran and licensed RN with 6 years at Clearwater Regional Hospital. She has no criminal history, strong community ties, and poses 0 flight risk. We request release on personal recognizance." Mitchell cleared his throat. "The state opposes. The defendant attacked multiple officers during a routine traffic stop, causing injury. She represents a clear danger. Itugi." She defended herself against excessive force, Rebecca cut in. Force that was never justified and violated her Fourth Amendment rights. Judge Harmon held up a hand. Save it for trial. Bail is set at $50,000. Sarah felt the number like a punch. $50,000 meant $5,000 to a bondsman. Money she didn't have liquid. Rebecca leaned close. I'll make some calls. We'll get you out. But as they led Sarah back to holding, she caught Garrison watching from the gallery, arms crossed, expression satisfied. He wanted her broke, scared, isolated. What? Rebecca came through 8 hours later with a bondsman who took Sarah's car title as collateral. By evening, Sarah walked out of Ashford County Jail into cold Montana air that tasted like freedom and warning. Rebecca waited by her car. You're out, but you need to be smart. Stay away from Garrison's people. Don't go anywhere alone. Document everything. I'm not running. I'm not asking you to run. I'm asking you to survive until trial. Rebecca handed her a business card. I'm already digging into Garrison's history. If he's done this before, there'll be a pattern. Sarah took the card. There is a pattern. I heard his deputies talking. They've sanitized evidence before. This is routine for them. Rebecca's expression sharpened. You heard that? Every word. That's good. We'll use it. Rebecca glanced around the parking lot. But Sarah, these guys aren't playing. If they're willing to destroy evidence, they're willing to do worse. Watch your back. Sarah drove her loaner car, a beat-up sedan Rebecca had arranged, back to her apartment. The building looked the same, but everything felt different. She parked in back, used the rear entrance, and climbed 3 flights to her unit. Inside, she locked the door, drew the blinds, and sat in the dark for 20 minutes, just listening. No footsteps in the hallway, no cars idling outside. She pulled out her phone and started writing down everything she could remember. Times, locations, names, exact quotes from the deputy's conversation. If this went to trial, she needed her memory locked down before adrenaline and time eroded the details. Her phone buzzed. A text from her supervisor at Clearwater Regional. Need to talk. Call me. Sarah dialed. Dr. Helen Ortega answered immediately. Sarah, I just got a call from hospital administration. There's been a complaint filed against you. What kind of complaint? Assault? A police complaint. They're putting you on administrative leave pending investigation. Sarah closed her eyes. Of course they were. Garrison wasn't just attacking her in court. He was dismantling her life piece by piece. Dr. Ortega, I didn't assault anyone. I was defending myself during an illegal stop. I believe you, but my hands are tied. HR is demanding you stay away from the hospital until this is resolved. How long? However long it takes. Ortega's voice softened. I'm sorry, Sarah. I'll do what I can. The call ended. Sarah sat in the dark, feeling the walls close in. No job, no income, $50,000 in bail debt, and a trial that could send her to prison. Blessings. The next morning, Sarah went to the grocery store for the first time since her arrest. She needed food, needed to move, needed to feel like a human being instead of a target. She was in the produce section when she felt it, eyes on her back. She turned slowly. A patrol car sat in the parking lot, visible through the front windows. Deputy Walsh behind the wheel, watching her. Sarah finished shopping, paid, and walked to her car. Walsh's cruiser stayed put, but his eyes tracked her the entire way. It continued for days. Patrol cars outside her apartment, deputies in the coffee shop where she bought her morning drink. Unmarked sedans following her to Rebecca's office. They wanted her to know she was being watched, wanted her to feel hunted. Sarah started documenting it all. Photos, timestamps, license plates. She bought a small notebook and carried it everywhere, logging every instance of surveillance. Rebecca was building a case, but Sarah was building her own record. A week after her release, Sarah met Rebecca at a diner on the edge of town. Neutral ground, public, witnesses. Rebecca spread files across the table. I found something. Garrison's been named in 4 civil complaints over the past decade. All dismissed or settled quietly. What kind of complaints? Excessive force? False arrest? Evidence tampering? The plaintiffs all had one thing in common. They were outsiders. People passing through. People without community ties. People who couldn't fight back, Sarah said. Exactly. Rebecca pulled out another document. There's more. I talked to a retired deputy who left Ashford PD 8 years ago. He wouldn't go on record, but he confirmed Garrison runs the department like a fiefdom. If you cross him, your career ends. If you're a civilian, your life gets complicated. How complicated? Arrests, harassment, lost jobs. One guy had his business licenses mysteriously revoked. Rebecca met Sarah's eyes. Garrison's protected because he delivers results. Low crime stats, high-profile busts. The city loves him. But the way he gets those results is by controlling who gets targeted and who gets ignored. Right. And you broke the pattern. You didn't fold, you didn't plead out, you didn't disappear. Rebecca closed the files. That makes you dangerous to him. Sarah felt the weight of it settling. So what do? We keep digging. We find someone willing to testify. We build a case that even Garrison can't bury. And if we can't? Rebecca didn't answer immediately. Then, we go to federal court, civil rights violation, deprivation under color of law. It's messier, takes longer, but it bypasses the local machinery. How long? Years, probably. Sarah looked out the diner window. A patrol car rolled past slowly, not Walsh this time, but another deputy she didn't recognize. I don't have years, Sarah said quietly. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She kept running scenarios, trying to find an angle Garrison hadn't already covered. He controlled the local courts. He controlled the police reports. He had witnesses who'd lie under oath and a department that would back them. She was one person against an entire system designed to crush exactly this kind of resistance. Her phone buzzed at 2:47 a.m. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Then instinct made her pick up. Ms. Bennett? A man's voice. Calm. Professional. Unfamiliar. Who is this? Major Ethan Graves, U.S. Army Criminal Investigation Division. I need to ask you some questions about an incident that occurred on Highway 12 approximately 10 days ago. Sarah sat up, fully awake now. How did you get this number? I have access to your service record. Your commanding officer in Afghanistan flagged your name when it appeared in a law enforcement database. I've been reviewing the details of your arrest. Why would CID care about a local traffic stop? Because you're still in the individual ready reserve, Ms. Bennett. That makes certain violations of your civil rights a matter of military interest. Graves paused. And because the pattern of behavior described in the arrest report doesn't match anything in your military file. So either you've had a dramatic personality change in 6 years, or someone's lying. Sarah's heart hammered. They're lying. I'm starting to think so, which is why I'm in Ashford right now. I'd like to meet tomorrow, somewhere public. Bring your lawyer if you want. Why are you really here, Major? Because soldiers look out for soldiers, Ms. Bennett, even after they take off the uniform. His voice hardened slightly. And because if a police department is willing to fabricate charges against a decorated combat medic, I want to know what else they're fabricating. Yeah. Sarah met Major Graves at the same diner where she'd met Rebecca, this time at noon with sunlight pouring through the windows. Graves was exactly what she expected. Mid-40s, precise posture, eyes that cataloged everything. Rebecca sat beside Sarah, legal pad ready. Graves didn't waste time. Walk me through the traffic stop, every detail. Sarah did. Graves took notes, asked clarifying questions, circled back to specifics. When she finished, he sat back. You said Deputy Walsh reached for his taser before you made physical contact. Yes. And you responded with defensive maneuvers consistent with Army combatives training. Yes. Graves tapped his pen against his notebook. Ms. Bennett, I've reviewed your service jacket. 3 commendations. 2 Bronze Stars. You pulled wounded soldiers out of firefights. You performed field surgery under mortar fire. Your psychological evaluation shows 0 indicators of aggression or instability. I know what I am, Sarah said quietly. I know you do. The question is whether Ashford PD knows what they're dealing with. Graves leaned forward. I've made some inquiries. Captain Garrison's record is impressive on paper, but there are gaps. Complaints that vanished. Witnesses who recanted. Evidence that disappeared. Rebecca spoke up. Major, are you suggesting federal involvement? I'm suggesting that if Ashford PD is engaged in a pattern of civil rights violations, that's a federal matter, And if they targeted Ms. Bennett because they thought she was vulnerable, they miscalculated. Graves pulled out a card. I'm going to be in town for a few more days. If anything escalates, anything, you call me directly. Sarah took the card. What can you actually do? Right now? Ask questions, make people nervous, document patterns. Graves stood. But if I find evidence of systemic corruption, I can bring in people who have jurisdiction over local law enforcement, people Garrison can't intimidate. Doc. Walking back to her car, Sarah felt something shift. For the first time since the arrest, she wasn't alone. Graves represented something Garrison couldn't control, external oversight with actual authority. Rebecca walked beside her. That was interesting. You think he's serious? CID doesn't fly investigators to Montana for fun. He's serious. Rebecca unlocked her car. But Sarah, this also means you're now officially a problem for Garrison. Before you were just a nuisance. Now you're a threat. Good, Sarah said. That night, 3 patrol cars parked outside her apartment building. Not hiding, not even pretending to be on routine patrol. Just sitting there, lights off, engines running. Sarah photographed them from her window, logged the time and badge numbers she could make out, and sent everything to Rebecca and Graves. Graves texted back, noted, stay inside tonight. Otik. The intimidation intensified over the next 48 hours. Patrol cars followed Sarah everywhere. Deputies showed up at the coffee shop where she studied case files. Someone, she couldn't prove who, slashed 2 of her tires while her car sat in a grocery store parking lot. Rebecca filed a formal complaint with the city. It went nowhere. Sarah kept documenting everything. Then Graves called. I need you to come to the federal building in Billings tomorrow, 10 a.m. Bring everything you've collected, photos, logs, recordings if you have them. What's happening? I found 2 other victims. People Garrison targeted in the past 3 years. They're willing to talk. Graves paused. This is bigger than your case, Miss Bennett. We're building a pattern and practice investigation. Sarah's hands shook as she ended the call. Pattern and practice meant federal civil rights charges. It meant exposing the entire department. It also meant Garrison would do everything possible to stop it. Sarah didn't make it to Billings. The next morning, she walked to her car in the apartment parking lot. She was 10 feet away when a black SUV screeched to a stop behind her, blocking her path. 4 men got out. Not in uniform, no badges visible, but she recognized Walsh's face immediately. Going somewhere? Walsh asked, moving closer. Sarah's combat instinct screamed. She was trapped between the SUV and a concrete wall. No witnesses, 4 against 1. I'm meeting my lawyer, she said, keeping her voice steady. No, you're not. Walsh moved fast, but Sarah was faster. She sidestepped his grab, drove her elbow into his ribs, and spun toward the gap between 2 parked cars. The other 3 closed in. Sarah fought like she'd been trained, controlled strikes, defensive positioning, targeting weak points. She dropped 1 man with a knee to the groin, used another's momentum to throw him into the SUV. But there were too many. A fist connected with her jaw. Another hit her ribs. She tasted blood, felt her vision blur. Then headlights flooded the parking lot. A vehicle roared in. Not a patrol car, not civilian. Military plated. Federal government tags. Walsh and his men scattered, diving into their SUV and burning rubber out of the lot. Major Graves emerged from the driver's seat, followed by 2 other soldiers in plain clothes. Sarah slumped against her car, breathing hard, blood running from her split lip. Graves crouched beside her. You okay? Been worse. I believe it. He helped her stand. We've been watching Garrison's people. When 4 of them moved on your location, we followed. They were going to kill me, Sarah said quietly. Probably not, but they were going to hurt you bad enough that you couldn't testify. Graves gestured to one of the other soldiers who was already photographing the scene. This just became assault under color of law, federal jurisdiction, no more local courts. Sarah wiped blood from her mouth. What happens now? Graves smiled grimly. Now we stop playing defense. Within an hour, Sarah sat in a secured conference room inside the federal building in Billings, an ice pack pressed against her swelling jaw. The room smelled like burnt coffee and government-issue furniture polish. Graves stood at the head of a table covered in files, photographs, and laptop screens showing surveillance footage. 2 other people sat across from Sarah. A woman in her 40s with nervous hands and tired eyes introduced herself as Monica Reeves. The man beside her, younger, looked like he hadn't slept in days. His name was David Kern. Rebecca arrived 20 minutes later, briefcase swinging, eyes blazing. They put their hands on you in broad daylight? Tried to, Sarah said. Major Graves interrupted. Graves pulled up a video on his laptop and turned it toward the table. This is footage from a surveillance camera mounted on the apartment building across from Ms. Bennett's parking lot. We obtained it an hour ago. The video played. Sarah watched herself walk toward her car, watched the black SUV screech in, watched Walsh and 3 others surround her. The fight lasted 90 seconds. Brutal, desperate, 4 men trying to subdue 1 woman who refused to go down easy. Then the military vehicle appeared and the attackers fled. Monica Reeves covered her mouth. "Oh my God!" David Kern just stared, his face pale. Graves stopped the video. "That's 4 deputies from Ashford PD committing aggravated assault under color of law, federal crime. But it's not the first time they've done this, and Ms. Bennett isn't their first victim." He gestured to Monica and David. "Ms. Reeves was arrested 2 years ago during a traffic stop on Highway 12. Same road, same deputies. Charges were eventually dropped, but not before she lost her job and spent 3 nights in county jail." Monica's voice shook. "They said I was driving erratically. I wasn't. I'd had 1 glass of wine with dinner 3 hours earlier. They made me do field sobriety tests for 40 minutes. When I passed everything, they arrested me anyway for refusing a breathalyzer." "Did you refuse?" Rebecca asked. "No, I took it. I blew zeros. They arrested me anyway and said the machine malfunctioned." Monica's hands twisted together. "My lawyer told me to take a plea deal. He said fighting it would cost more than I could afford." Graves nodded. "Mr. Kern had a similar experience 14 months ago. Different circumstances. Same outcome." David finally spoke, his voice flat. "I was camping in the National Forest. Came into town for supplies. Got pulled over for a broken taillight that wasn't broken. They searched my vehicle without permission, found camping gear and hiking equipment, and decided I looked suspicious. Arrested me for possession of burglary tools." Sarah blinked. "Camping gear?" "Rope, a crowbar for tent stakes, a headlamp." David's jaw tightened. "They held me for 2 days before my girlfriend could scrape together bail money. By the time I got out, I'd lost my job. Couldn't make rent. Had to move back to Idaho." Rebecca leaned forward. "Why didn't either of you fight back? File complaints?" Monica and David exchanged glances. Monica answered first. "I tried. I filed a complaint with the department. 2 days later, a deputy showed up at my house at midnight. Didn't say anything, just stood on my porch for 10 minutes, then left. The message was clear." David nodded. "Same thing happened to me, patrol cars outside my apartment, following me to work. I dropped the complaint because I was terrified." Graves pulled up more files. "I've identified 6 other cases with similar patterns over the past 5 years. Questionable stops, escalated arrests, evidence problems, victims who either took plea deals or dropped complaints after intimidation." "All on Highway 12? Sarah asked. "Mostly. A few in town, but the common thread is Captain Garrison. He's either directly involved or his people are executing his playbook." Graves looked at each person around the table. "What we're looking at is a systemic pattern of civil rights violations. False arrests, evidence tampering, witness intimidation, and now assault under color of law." Rebecca pulled out her own notes. "Major, what's your jurisdiction here?" "Ms. Bennett is IRR. That gives me initial standing, but I've also contacted the FBI's Civil Rights Division and the Department of Justice. They're interested." "How interested?" "Interested enough to send investigators to Ashford within 48 hours. The room went quiet. Sarah could feel the weight of it. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was about dismantling an entire corrupt system that had operated unchecked for years. Monica spoke quietly. "If I testify, they'll come after me again." "Not if we move fast enough," Graves said. "Once federal charges are filed, Garrison and his people become targets of an active investigation. If they retaliate, it's obstruction. They're not stupid enough to risk that." "They were stupid enough to assault Sarah in a parking lot," David pointed out, "because they thought they could get away with it. They thought she was alone." Graves met Sarah's eyes. "They miscalculated." Rebecca stood. "I need to make some calls. If DOJ is getting involved, we need to coordinate. Sarah's criminal charges need to be dismissed immediately, and we need protective orders for everyone at this table. Already working on it, Graves said. Sarah felt exhaustion creeping in, physical pain from the fight, emotional fatigue from weeks of pressure. But underneath it all, something else stirred. Anger, cold and focused. These people had tried to destroy her because they thought she was powerless. They'd built careers on targeting the vulnerable, knowing their victims couldn't fight back. But Sarah had fought in places where the stakes were life and death. Ashford PD was just another kind of battlefield. Monica touched Sarah's arm gently. Thank you for not backing down. I couldn't, but you did. Sarah looked at her, then at David, then at the surveillance footage frozen on Graves's screen. They hurt people because they think nobody's watching. Now somebody is. Graves closed his laptop. We reconvene tomorrow morning. DOJ investigators will want statements from all of you. In the meantime, Ms. Bennett, you're staying in federal protective custody. We have a safe location in Billings. I'm not running from Ashford. You're not running, you're regrouping. Graves' tone left no room for argument. They tried to put you in the hospital this morning. They'll try again if you give them the chance. Sarah wanted to argue, but Rebecca cut in. He's right. You can't win this if you're dead. The words hit harder than Walsh's fists had. Sarah nodded slowly. Okay, but just until DOJ arrives. That's all I'm asking. They moved Sarah to a bland hotel near the federal building, the kind of place business travelers used for one-night stays. 2 federal agents were stationed in the hallway. Graves handed her a phone, clean, prepaid, untraceable. Only use this to contact me or your lawyer. Don't call anyone else. Sarah took it. How long do you think this takes? Building the case? Weeks, maybe months. But getting Garrison off the street? Graves smiled thinly. Could be as soon as tomorrow if DOJ moves fast. After he left, Sarah stood at the window, looking out at Billings' skyline. The city felt anonymous compared to Ashford. Bigger, colder, safer. For the first time in weeks, she wasn't looking over her shoulder. She slept for 4 hours. Dreamless, heavy sleep that her body demanded. When she woke, her phone showed 3 missed calls from Rebecca and 1 text from Graves. DOJ, team arrived early, meeting at 800. Sarah showered, wincing as hot water hit the bruises spreading across her ribs. Purple and yellow bloomed along her side where one of Walsh's friends had landed a solid punch. Her jaw ached. Her knuckles were scraped raw. She looked like she'd been in a war. Because she had been. The DOJ team consisted of 3 people. Special Agent Lauren Vickers from the FBI's Civil Rights Division, a federal prosecutor named James Aldrich, and a forensic analyst named Quan, whose first name Sarah never caught. They set up in a larger conference room with better coffee and professional recording equipment. Vickers ran the interview. Mid-30s, dark suit, questions like surgical instruments, precise and sharp. Ms. Bennett, I need you to walk me through every interaction with Ashford PD from the initial traffic stop to this morning's assault. Take your time. Details matter. Sarah did. It took 90 minutes to cover everything, pausing frequently so Vickers could ask follow-up questions and Aldrich could clarify legal points. Quan recorded everything and took notes that looked more like diagrams. When Sarah finished, Vickers sat back. Major Graves provided us with the surveillance footage from this morning. We also obtained your arrest records, booking photos, and medical intake documentation from county jail. Why medical intake? Sarah asked. Because you had visible injuries when you were booked, bruising consistent with being struck multiple times. The jail nurse documented it. Vickers pulled up a file on her laptop and turned it around. Sarah saw her own face staring back. Mugshot lighting harsh and unflattering, but the bruises clear, swelling around her left eye. A cut on her cheekbone. Marks on her neck where Walsh had grabbed her. The official report states you sustained these injuries while resisting arrest, Aldrich said. But the medical documentation tells a different story. The nurse noted the injuries were defensive in nature, consistent with being struck while trying to protect yourself. Rebecca leaned forward. That contradicts the deputy's statements. Exactly, Vickers said, which means either the deputies lied in their reports or the medical documentation is fabricated. Given everything else we're seeing, I'm betting on the former. Sarah felt a small flicker of vindication. What happens now? Aldrich answered. We interview the other victims. We subpoena department records, dashcam footage, body camera recordings, internal communications. We bring in a forensic team to examine their evidence room and digital systems. We build an airtight case. How long? Depends on how cooperative Ashford PD is. If they stonewall, we go to a federal judge and get warrants. Either way, we're moving forward. Vickers stood. Ms. Bennett, I want you to understand something. What happened to you is egregious, but it's part of a larger pattern. Our investigation isn't just about your case, it's about cleaning up an entire department. I understand. Good, because this is going to get messy. Garrison has friends, he has political connections, he's going to fight back. Sarah met her eyes. Let him. The DOJ team spent the rest of the day interviewing Monica and David, reviewing files, and making calls to Washington. Sarah waited in the hotel, pacing, restless. She'd spent weeks being reactive, responding to threats, defending herself, surviving. Now other people were taking action while she sat on the sidelines. It felt wrong. Rebecca showed up at 6 p.m. with takeout food and an update. Aldrich filed a motion to dismiss all charges against you. Given the video evidence and the circumstances, the judge signed off immediately. You're clear. Sarah felt something loosen in her chest. Just like that? Well, it helps when federal prosecutors get involved and present video of the same deputies who arrested you trying to beat you unconscious in a parking lot. Rebecca set the food on the table. But yes, all charges dismissed. Your record is clean. What about Monica and David? Aldrich is reviewing their cases too. If there's evidence of prosecutorial misconduct or falsified reports, those charges could be vacated as well. Sarah opened one of the containers. Chinese food, still hot. What happens to Garrison? That depends on what DOJ finds, but Vickers told me they're already seeing enough for federal charges, civil rights violations, conspiracy to deprive rights under color of law, possibly RICO if they can prove the corruption extended beyond the department. Sarah picked at her food. How long before they arrest him? Could be days, could be weeks. They want the case locked down before they move. So we just wait. Rebecca looked at her carefully. Sarah, you've been fighting alone for weeks. Let the professionals handle it now. You've done your part. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Garrison wasn't the type to go quietly. He'd built his power through intimidation and violence. Cornered, he'd be even more dangerous. She said as much to Graves when he checked in later that evening. Graves nodded. You're probably right, which is why you're staying in protective custody until we have him in custody. And if he runs? He won't. Men like Garrison don't run. They think they're untouchable right up until the handcuffs click. Sarah wanted to believe that, but her combat experience had taught her that the most dangerous moment in any operation was right before victory, when the enemy had nothing left to lose. The next 48 hours crawled past. DOJ investigators descended on Ashford like a federal storm. They served subpoenas. They interviewed current and former department employees. They seized computers and files. The local news picked up the story, and suddenly Sarah's case was splashed across Montana headlines. Rebecca called with updates twice a day. Vickers found 5 more victims willing to come forward, all similar patterns, all too scared to fight back until now. How's Garrison responding? His lawyer released a statement calling it a witch hunt. But behind the scenes, he's panicking. 3 of his deputies have already flipped and agreed to cooperate with DOJ in exchange for reduced charges. Sarah absorbed that. Which deputies? Not Walsh, he's sticking with Garrison. But the 2 who were with him this morning, they're talking. That meant testimony, direct evidence, witnesses willing to confirm the conspiracy from the inside. The net was tightening. On the 3rd day, Vickers called Sarah directly. We're moving on Garrison tomorrow morning. Federal arrest warrant, multiple counts. I wanted you to know before it hits the news. Sarah's pulse quickened. What about Walsh and the others? Simultaneous arrests. We're taking down everyone involved in the assault on you, plus anyone we can connect to the broader conspiracy. Vickers paused. This is because of you, Ms. Bennett. If you hadn't fought back, if you hadn't documented everything, if you hadn't stood your ground, none of this happens. I just didn't want to be another victim. Well, you're not. You're the reason this entire house of cards is collapsing. After the call ended, Sarah sat in the quiet hotel room, feeling the weight of what was about to happen. Tomorrow, the man who tried to destroy her would be arrested. The deputies who'd assaulted her would be in federal custody. The system that protected them would be exposed. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like the eye of a hurricane, temporary calm before the final storm. She was right. Graves called at 11 p.m., voice tight. "We have a problem. Garrison's gone." Sarah was on her feet instantly. "What do you mean gone?" "He didn't show up for work this morning. His house is empty. His personal vehicle is missing. We've got BOLO alerts out, but he's in the wind." "He ran. Looks that way, which means he knows we're coming for him." Graves exhaled hard. "DOJ is worried he might try something desperate before we find him." "Like what?" "Like coming after the witnesses. Like coming after you." Sarah felt ice slide down her spine. "I'm in federal custody. He can't get to me here." "Can't he? He's got contacts. He knows law enforcement protocols. He's been working the system for 2 decades. Graves' tone sharpened. "I'm doubling your security. Nobody goes in or out of that hotel room except cleared personnel." "What about Monica and David?" "Already moved to secure locations. Everyone who testified is under protection." Sarah paced the small room. "Garrison's smart. He won't go after protected witnesses. He'll go after something else." "Like what?" Sarah thought fast, running scenarios. "Evidence. He'll try to destroy whatever DOJ hasn't seized yet. Files, recordings, digital records. We already secured the department's servers and physical files." "What about backups? Personal copies? Deputies who kept their own insurance?" Sarah's mind raced. "These guys don't trust each other. If Garrison's running, his people are scrambling, someone's going to make a move to protect themselves." Graves was quiet for a moment. "That's a good point. I'll pass it to Vickers." But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was missing something. Garrison wasn't the type to just disappear. He'd ruled Ashford through fear and control. Running meant abandoning everything he'd built. Unless he wasn't running. Unless he was positioning. She called Rebecca. "Where's the evidence DOJ seized from the department?" Rebecca sounded groggy. Sarah had woken her up. "Federal evidence storage in Billings. Why? Is it all there? Everything they took?" "As far as I know." "Sarah, what are you thinking?" "I'm thinking Garrison knows that evidence destroys him, and I'm thinking he's desperate enough to try something nobody expects." Rebecca was fully awake now. "You think he'd attack a federal facility?" "I think he's calculating risk versus reward. If that evidence disappears, DOJ's case gets a lot weaker. If he can make it look like an accident, a fire, a system failure, something, he might buy himself time." "That's insane." "So is assaulting a federal witness in broad daylight. These guys don't think like normal criminals. They think like cops who believe they're above the law." Rebecca promised to call Vickers immediately. Sarah hung up and stared at the hotel window. Below, Billings stretched out in artificial light and darkness. Somewhere out there, Garrison was making his next move. She just had to figure out what it was before he made it. The call came at 2:14 a.m. Graves, voice clipped and urgent. "Get dressed. We're moving you." "What happened?" "Fire at the federal storage facility. Evidence room is compromised." Sarah's blood went cold. "Garrison?" "Don't know yet, but I'm not taking chances. You're being relocated to a different facility until we sort this out." Sarah grabbed her clothes, dressed in 30 seconds. 2 federal agents entered her room, neither of them people she recognized. The woman showed her badge, Agent Carolyn Foster. The man was Agent Tim Bradford. "We're taking you to a secure location outside the city," Foster said. "Grab whatever you need. We leave in 2 minutes." Sarah's combat instinct screamed warning. Something felt off. "Where's Major Graves?" "Coordinating the response to the fire. He ordered us to move you immediately." "I need to verify that." Bradford's expression hardened. "Ma'am, we don't have time for verification. The facility is burning. If Garrison torched it, he knows where you are. We need to move now." Foster stepped closer, her hand resting on her sidearm. "Ms. Bennett, we're trying to keep you alive. Please don't make this difficult." Sarah calculated odds. 2 armed agents. 1 exit. If they were legitimate, she was being paranoid. If they weren't, her phone buzzed. Text from Graves. "Do not leave hotel. Security breach. Unknown hostiles in building. Stay put." Sarah's hand moved before thought caught up. She grabbed the lamp from the bedside table and swung it at Bradford's head. He dodged, but the motion gave her space. She kicked Foster's knee, heard something pop, and dove for the bathroom. Gunshots punched through the door. Sarah hit the tile floor, adrenaline flooding her system. She heard Bradford shouting into his radio. Not federal codes, wrong cadence, wrong protocol. These weren't federal agents. Sarah looked around the bathroom frantically. Small window, too high to reach. No weapons except a towel bar in her own hands. She ripped the towel bar from the wall. Cheap metal, but better than nothing. The door exploded inward. Bradford came through first. Sarah drove the metal bar into his throat, then used his body as a shield when Foster fired again. The bullet hit Bradford instead of Sarah. Foster hesitated, half a second of shock seeing her partner fall. Sarah didn't hesitate. She grabbed Bradford's dropped weapon, a move so instinctive it felt like muscle memory, and aimed it at Foster. Drop it. Foster's face twisted with rage and desperation. He's going to kill us if we don't bring you. Who? Garrison. He's got my sister. He said if we don't deliver you... The window shattered. Real federal agents poured through the door, weapons trained, shouting commands. Foster dropped her gun and raised her hands, tears streaming down her face. Graves appeared, surveyed the scene, Bradford bleeding on the bathroom floor, Foster in custody, Sarah standing with a gun in shaking hands. You okay? He asked. Sarah lowered the weapon carefully. They said Garrison has someone's sister. Graves's expression went dark. We'll handle it. Right now, we need to get you somewhere actually secure. The fire? Controlled, minimal damage. Garrison's people set it as a distraction while these two tried to grab you. Graves gestured to the agents. Get her out of here. Different location. Route Omega Protocol. Nobody knows the destination except command. As they hustled Sarah out of the hotel through a service entrance, she caught a glimpse of Foster being led away in handcuffs, still crying. The woman wasn't evil. She was desperate. Garrison had found her pressure point and exploited it. That's what made him dangerous. He didn't just break laws. He broke people. They drove Sarah to a location she couldn't identify, somewhere in the mountains, a cabin that looked abandoned from the outside but had sophisticated security inside. Graves stayed with her while a rotating team of agents secured the perimeter. How did Garrison know where I was? Sarah asked. We're still figuring that out, but he's got contacts we didn't account for, people inside federal systems. Graves poured coffee from a thermos. The good news is we recovered Foster's phone. She's been in contact with Garrison for the past 6 hours. We have his location. Where? Heading toward the Canadian border. He's running for real now. Sarah wrapped her hands around the coffee mug. What about the sister? Already found her. Safe. Garrison was bluffing. He never had her. He just convinced Foster he did. Sarah closed her eyes. All of this. The violence, the conspiracy, the desperation. Because one man couldn't accept accountability. Because he'd built his identity on power and control, and losing it meant losing everything. Graves' phone buzzed. He answered, listened, then looked at Sarah with something like grim satisfaction. Border Patrol just stopped Garrison 30 miles from Canada. He's in custody. Sarah felt it then, the release of tension she'd been carrying for weeks. Not relief exactly. More like the moment after a firefight when you realize you're still alive. What happens now? She asked. Now? Graves smiled. Now he faces every single charge DOJ built, and you get to watch him answer for it. But even as he said it, Sarah knew this wasn't over. Garrison might be in custody, but his network remained. The deputies who'd followed his orders, the officials who'd looked the other way, the system that enabled years of abuse. One arrest wouldn't fix that, but it was a start. And Sarah had learned something in the past weeks. She was done being a victim, done being silent, done letting people like Garrison operate in the shadows. If they wanted a war, she'd give them one. Graves stood. Get some rest. Tomorrow we start preparing you to testify. After he left, Sarah sat alone in the cabin, listening to wind move through the pines outside. Somewhere in federal custody, Garrison was probably realizing the same thing she'd realized weeks ago in that county jail cell. The people who thought they were untouchable were always the most surprised when the world touched back. Sarah pulled out the phone Graves had given her and sent a text to Rebecca. Garrison's arrested. I'm safe. What's next? The response came back immediately. Next, we make sure he never walks free again. Sarah spent the next 3 days in the mountain cabin preparing for what Rebecca called the performance of your life. Federal prosecutors wanted her testimony airtight, every detail documented, every timeline verified, every potential defense argument anticipated and dismantled. Aldrich arrived on the second day with boxes of documents and a laptop loaded with video evidence. He set up in the cabin's main room like he was preparing for war. Garrison's lawyer is Marcus Holt, Aldrich said, spreading files across the table. Former federal prosecutor turned defense attorney. He's expensive, he's aggressive, and he specializes in destroying witnesses on cross-examination. Sarah sat across from him. What's his strategy going to be? He'll attack your credibility, paint you as unstable, argue that your military background makes you prone to violence, and that you escalated the traffic stop, not his client. Aldrich pulled up a document. He's already filed motions to exclude your service record as prejudicial and to admit psychiatric evaluations from your time in the Army. I never had psychiatric issues. Doesn't matter. He'll twist routine post-deployment screenings into evidence of PTSD. He'll suggest you're a danger to yourself and others. Aldrich met her eyes. And if he can make the jury believe that, Garrison walks. Rebecca leaned against the cabin wall, arms crossed. We counter with the surveillance footage, the medical evidence, the other victim's testimony, all of which Holt will attack as circumstantial or biased. Aldrich pulled up another file. The prosecution's case is strong, but it's not bulletproof. We need you on that stand, calm and credible, walking the jury through exactly what happened. Sarah absorbed that. When's the trial? Fast-tracked. Federal judge wants this resolved quickly. Given the media attention and the severity of the charges, we're looking at 3 weeks. 3 weeks to prepare. 3 weeks until she'd face Garrison across a courtroom. 3 weeks until everything she'd fought for would be tested in front of 12 strangers who'd decide whether she was a victim or a threat. Aldrich spent hours drilling her on testimony. He played Holt's role, asking hostile questions, twisting her words, looking for inconsistencies. He pushed until Sarah wanted to scream, then pushed harder. You said Deputy Walsh reached for his taser. Are you sure it was a taser and not his radio? I'm sure. But you were stressed, afraid. Your heart was racing. Could you have misidentified the object? No. I saw the yellow markings. I saw his finger on the trigger. But in the dark, with flashing lights, isn't it possible? I've been shot at in Afghanistan. I know the difference between a weapon and a radio. Aldrich nodded. Good. That's the tone you need. Confident, but not aggressive. Factual, but not defensive. They ran scenarios until Sarah's voice went hoarse. Aldrich threw everything at her. Accusations of lying, suggestions she'd attacked first, implications she was mentally unstable. By the third day, Sarah could anticipate his questions before he asked them. Rebecca watched one of the practice sessions, then pulled Sarah aside afterward. You're ready. I don't feel ready. Nobody ever does. But you've got something Holt can't prepare for. What's that? The truth. Rebecca squeezed her shoulder. You're not making this up. You're not exaggerating. Everything you're going to say actually happened. That comes through. Sarah wanted to believe her, but she'd seen enough in the Army to know that truth didn't always win. Sometimes the better story won. Sometimes the louder voice won. Sometimes the side with more resources and connections won. Garrison had resources, he had connections, and he had nothing to lose. Graves showed up on the fourth day with news that changed everything. He looked like he hadn't slept, his uniform rumpled, his expression grim. We've got a problem, he said without preamble. One of our witnesses is backing out. Sarah's stomach dropped. Who? David Kern. He got a visit last night from someone claiming to be a journalist. Asked him questions about his testimony, his background, his family. This morning, David called his lawyer and said he's withdrawing his statement. Someone threatened him, Rebecca said immediately. That's our assumption, but David won't confirm it, and we can't prove it. Graves sat heavily in one of the cabin chairs. Without his testimony, we lose a key piece of the pattern. Holt will argue that Sarah's case is an isolated incident, not part of a broader conspiracy. Aldrich cursed under his breath. What about Monica Reeves? Still solid, but one witness isn't enough to establish a pattern. We need at least 2 for DOJ to pursue the systemic corruption angle. Sarah felt anger rising, hot and sharp. So Garrison's people are still out there intimidating witnesses, and we're just going to let it happen. We're not letting anything happen, Graves shot back. We've got agents trying to identify who approached David, but he's terrified, and I don't blame him. These people have already proven they'll hurt anyone who gets in their way. The room went silent. Sarah could hear wind rattling the cabin windows, could feel the weight of what they were facing. Garrison might be in custody, but his network wasn't. His deputies, his allies, his co-conspirators, they were all still free, still dangerous, still working to dismantle the case against him. Rebecca broke the silence. What if we found another witness? Someone Garrison's people haven't gotten to yet. We've already interviewed everyone we could find, Aldrich said. Anyone else who might have been targeted either moved away or isn't willing to come forward. Then we look harder. Sarah stood, pacing the small room. Garrison didn't build this operation overnight. He's been dirty for years. There have to be other victims we haven't found yet. Graves shook his head. Sarah, we've combed through every complaint, every arrest record, every lawsuit for the past decade. If there were more victims willing to testify, we'd have found them. What about people who didn't file complaints? People who were too scared or didn't think anyone would believe them? How do we find people who never reported what happened to them? Sarah stopped pacing. An idea was forming, risky and maybe stupid, but it was something. We go public. We tell the media exactly what Garrison did and ask anyone else he targeted to come forward. Aldrich immediately shook his head. That's a terrible idea. It could compromise the trial. Holt would argue we're tainting the jury pool. The trial's already all over the news, Sarah countered. Going public doesn't change that. But it might give other victims the courage to speak up. Rebecca considered it. She's not wrong. If people see Monica and Sarah standing up, it might inspire others to do the same. Or it might give Garrison's people a target list, Graves said. Everyone who comes forward becomes someone to intimidate or silence. Then we protect them, Sarah said. Same way you're protecting me. Federal custody, safe locations, whatever it takes. Aldrich rubbed his face, thinking. It's risky, but we're running out of options. If David's out and we can't find replacements, the pattern and practice case falls apart. Graves looked at Sarah. You understand what you're proposing. You'd have to do interviews, show your face, make yourself a very public target. I'm already a target. At least this way we might save the case. The decision was made. Rebecca reached out to a journalist she trusted, Kelly Brennan from Montana Public Radio, known for investigative work and integrity. They set up an interview for the next day at a neutral location in Billings. Sarah barely slept that night. She kept running through what she'd say, how she'd frame it, whether anyone would even listen. The military had taught her to follow orders and execute plans. This felt different, improvised, uncertain, dependent on variables she couldn't control. But it was the only play they had left. Kelly Brennan met them in a conference room at the federal building. She was younger than Sarah expected, maybe 35, with sharp eyes and a recorder she set on the table like a challenge. I've been following this case, Kelly said. Victor Garrison was a decorated officer. The city trusted him. Now you're saying he's the head of a criminal conspiracy. I'm saying he abused his authority and hurt people, Sarah replied. And when I fought back, he tried to destroy me. Kelly hit record. Tell me what happened. Sarah walked through it again. The traffic stop, the assault, the arrest, the cover-up. Kelly asked pointed questions, circling back to details, looking for inconsistencies. Sarah kept her answers factual and direct. When she finished, Kelly leaned back. You know people are going to say you're making this up for attention or money. I don't want attention or money. I want justice. And you think going public will help? I think there are other people out there who Garrison hurt. People too scared to come forward. If they hear my story, maybe they'll realize they're not alone. Kelly studied her. You're either very brave or very naive. Maybe both. The interview aired that evening. Sarah listened from the cabin as Kelly's voice filled the radio. A former Army combat medic is speaking out against one of Montana's most respected law enforcement officers, alleging a pattern of abuse that spans years. Sarah's phone started buzzing within minutes. Texts from people she hadn't talked to in months. Calls from reporters wanting follow-ups. Rebecca's phone was worse. Dozens of messages, some supportive, many hostile. But then, 2 hours after the broadcast, Graves called. We've got 3 people who've contacted us claiming Garrison targeted them. We're vetting their stories now. Sarah felt hope spark. Are they credible? 2 are solid, similar patterns to yours and Monica's. The 3rd needs more investigation, but it looks promising. Graves paused. You did good, Sarah. The next week blurred into a marathon of preparation. The 2 new witnesses, a truck driver named Frank Delgado and a college student named Mia Howell, gave statements to DOJ. Their stories matched the pattern: questionable stops, escalated arrests, evidence problems, intimidation. Aldrich incorporated them into his trial strategy. Holt filed motions to exclude their testimony as prejudicial. The judge denied most of them. Sarah watched it all from the cabin, feeling like a piece on a chessboard being moved by players she couldn't see. The trial date approached. 11 days, then 7, then 3. Rebecca came to the cabin 2 days before the trial with a garment bag. You need to look professional on the stand, credible, sympathetic without looking weak. Sarah tried on the outfit: simple blouse, dark pants, minimal jewelry. She looked like someone's daughter or sister. Exactly the image they wanted the jury to see. How are you feeling? Rebecca asked. Like I'm about to jump out of a plane without checking if the parachute works. The parachute works. We've tested every part of this case. You just have to trust the process. But trust felt like a luxury Sarah couldn't afford. She'd trusted the system before, trusted that doing the right thing would matter, that telling the truth would be enough. That trust had gotten her arrested, assaulted, and nearly killed. Now she was being asked to trust again. Trust prosecutors she barely knew. Trust a jury of strangers. Trust that justice would actually prevail. The night before the trial, Sarah couldn't sleep. She stood at the cabin window watching stars emerge through the mountain darkness. Somewhere out there, Garrison was in a federal holding cell, probably also awake, probably also running through scenarios. For weeks, he'd held all the power. He'd controlled the narrative, the evidence, the people around him. Now he was just another defendant waiting for a verdict. Sarah wondered if he understood yet what he'd done wrong. Not the legal violations or the civil rights abuses. She doubted he cared about those. But the fundamental miscalculation, assuming Sarah would break as easily as his other victims had. He'd underestimated her. And now he was going to pay for it. Graves drove Sarah to the courthouse in Billings the next morning. Federal building, high security, cameras everywhere. Protesters lined the steps, some supporting Garrison, others demanding justice for his victims. Sarah walked between them with her head up, refusing to show fear. Inside, the courtroom smelled like old wood and tension. Sarah sat behind the prosecution table with Rebecca beside her. Across the aisle, Victor Garrison sat in a suit that probably cost more than Sarah made in a month, looking calm and confident next to Marcus Holt. Their eyes met. Garrison smiled slightly, like they were old friends catching up. Sarah didn't smile back. The jury filed in, 7 women, 5 men, mixed ages and backgrounds. They looked tired already, and the trial hadn't even started. Judge Patricia Harmon took the bench, same judge who'd set Sarah's bail weeks ago. She surveyed the courtroom with an expression that suggested she'd seen this exact drama play out 1,000 times. We're here for United States versus Victor Garrison and others, she said. Multiple counts of civil rights violations, conspiracy, assault under color of law. Mr. Aldrich, your opening statement. Aldrich stood. He was good, calm, methodical, painting a picture of systematic abuse without sounding dramatic or exaggerated. He walked the jury through the pattern. Targets chosen carefully, stops escalated deliberately, evidence manipulated routinely. The defendant didn't just break the law, Aldrich said. He weaponized his authority against people he thought were powerless, people who wouldn't fight back, people who'd disappear quietly. He gestured to Sarah. But Miss Bennett didn't disappear. And because she refused to be silenced, we're all here today. Holt's opening was different. Emotional, indignant, framing Garrison as a dedicated officer being destroyed by a vindictive woman with a violent past. Ms. Bennett attacked 4 deputies during a routine traffic stop, Holt said. She put 3 of them in the hospital. And now, rather than accept responsibility, she's concocted an elaborate conspiracy theory to justify her violence. He painted Sarah as unstable, dangerous, manipulative, painted the other witnesses as opportunists jumping on a bandwagon, painted the entire prosecution as a witch hunt against a man who dedicated his life to public service. Sarah watched the jury, Some looked skeptical. Others looked sympathetic. She couldn't read which way they were leaning. The first witness was Monica Reeves. She took the stand looking terrified, voice shaking as she recounted her arrest. Aldrich walked her through it gently, the stop, the false breathalyzer claim, the threats that followed. Holt's cross-examination was brutal. He questioned every detail, implied she was lying for attention, suggested she'd been drunk and was covering it up. "Isn't it true you have a prior DUI from 10 years ago?" "Yes, but so you have a history of drinking and driving. That was a decade ago. I learned from it. Or you got better at hiding it." Monica's lawyer objected. The judge sustained it. But the damage was done. Holt had planted doubt. Frank Delgado testified next. Former truck driver stopped on Highway 12 for allegedly crossing the center line. Arrested when he questioned why he was being searched. Held for 36 hours before charges were dropped. Holt attacked him too, pulling up minor criminal history from 20 years prior, suggesting Frank was a career criminal who'd gotten off easy. Mia Howell broke down on the stand. College student pulled over after leaving a party, accused of DUI despite passing all sobriety tests. She sobbed while describing how deputies had mocked her, threatened her, made her feel like she deserved what was happening. Holt's cross made her sound like a spoiled kid who couldn't handle being held accountable. By the third day, Sarah could see the pattern. Holt wasn't denying that people had been arrested. He was arguing they deserved it, that they were all liars, criminals, or troublemakers who'd brought police attention on themselves. And the jury was listening. Then it was Sarah's turn. She walked to the witness stand, feeling every eye in the courtroom tracking her. She placed her hand on the Bible, muscle memory from military oaths, though she didn't think about what it meant anymore, and swore to tell the truth. Aldrich started gently. "Ms. Bennett, can you tell the jury about your background?" Sarah kept her voice steady. "I'm a registered nurse. I work in emergency medicine. Before that, I served 8 years in the U.S. Army as a combat medic." "What did that service involve?" "I was attached to evacuation units in Afghanistan and Iraq. We provided emergency medical care to wounded soldiers and transported them to field hospitals." "Did you see combat?" "Yes." "Were you ever disciplined or reprimanded during your service?" "No." "I received 3 commendations and 2 Bronze Stars." Aldrich walked her through the traffic stop. Sarah recounted it exactly as it had happened. No embellishment, no emotion, just facts. The jury listened, some taking notes. "When Deputy Walsh reached for his taser, what did you think?" "I thought he was going to incapacitate me. Based on his aggression and the way his colleagues were positioned, I believed I was in danger." "So what did you do?" "I defended myself using techniques I learned in the Army. I used the minimum force necessary to stop the threat." "Did you intend to hurt anyone?" "I intended to protect myself." Aldrich showed the surveillance footage from the parking lot assault. The jury watched Sarah fight off 4 men, watched her hold her ground until federal agents arrived. "Why didn't you run?" Aldrich asked. "Because running would have looked like guilt. I didn't do anything wrong." Holt's cross-examination started immediately after lunch. He circled Sarah like a predator, voice dripping with skepticism. "Ms. Bennett, you claim you were defending yourself, but you put 3 deputies in the hospital. They attacked me first. Or did you attack them?" Holt pulled up Walsh's medical report. "Deputy Walsh suffered 2 cracked ribs. That's serious injury. He tried to tase me. According to you, but there's no video evidence of that initial stop, is there? The dash cam malfunctioned. Or perhaps it didn't record anything because nothing improper happened." Holt leaned against the jury box. "Isn't it more likely that you simply didn't want to comply with lawful orders?" "The orders weren't lawful. I wasn't speeding. My vehicle had no defects. There was no legal basis for the stop. And you, a civilian nurse, felt qualified to make that legal determination on the side of the highway?" Sarah felt her jaw tighten. "I felt qualified to recognize when someone was violating my rights." Holt smiled like she'd walked into a trap. "Your rights. Let's talk about your military service. You saw combat, correct?" "Yes." "Violent combat. People died." "Yes." "And after you left the Army, did you receive any mental health treatment?" Aldrich objected. "Relevance, Your Honor." "I'm establishing the witness's state of mind," Holt said. "Her propensity for violence." Judge Harmon considered. "I'll allow it. But tread carefully, Mr. Holt." Holt turned back to Sarah. Did you receive treatment for post-traumatic stress? I participated in routine post-deployment screenings. Everyone does. And what did those screenings reveal? That I was adjusting normally to civilian life. But you were screened because the military was concerned about your mental state. They screen everyone. It's protocol. Protocol for soldiers who might be suffering from psychological trauma that could make them violent. Sarah forced herself to stay calm. I'm not violent. I'm a nurse. I save lives. You also take lives, don't you? Or you did. In combat. The courtroom went silent. Sarah felt heat rising in her chest, anger and frustration warring with the need to stay composed. I treated wounded soldiers, she said carefully. I didn't take lives. I saved them. But you were trained to kill, correct? I was trained to defend myself and my unit. The same training you used on Deputies Walsh and his colleagues. I used defensive techniques to protect myself from an illegal assault. Holt pulled up another document. According to your Army records, you're still in the Individual Ready Reserve. That means if there's another war, you could be called back. Would you go? If ordered, yes. So you're still a soldier, still trained for violence, still thinking like a combat operative. I'm a nurse, Sarah said again, voice harder now. I haven't thought like a soldier in 6 years. Really? Because when those deputies approached you, you responded with military tactics. You assessed threats. You engaged targets. You neutralized opposition. Holt's voice rose. That sounds like someone who's still very much a soldier. Sarah met his eyes. I responded the way anyone would when 4 armed men attack them without cause. The difference is, I had the training to survive it. The answer landed. Sarah could see it in the jury's faces, some of them nodding slightly, reconsidering. Holt tried to recover, circling back to questions about her psychiatric history, her combat experience, her alleged instability. But Sarah answered each one calmly, factually, refusing to be rattled. When he finally sat down, Sarah felt exhausted but intact. Aldrich's redirect was brief. Ms. Bennett, in all your years of military service and nursing, have you ever initiated violence against anyone? No. Have you ever been charged with a crime before this case? No. Have you ever lied under oath? No. Thank you. No further questions. Sarah stepped down from the stand and returned to her seat. Rebecca squeezed her hand under the table. The prosecution rested. Holt called his witnesses, character witnesses for Garrison, experts who questioned the reliability of the surveillance footage, former colleagues who swore Garrison was a model officer. One witness was a deputy who'd worked with Garrison for 15 years. He testified that Garrison always followed protocol, never used excessive force, was beloved by the community. On cross-examination, Aldrich pulled out the deputy's personnel file. Isn't it true you were named in 2 civil complaints for excessive force yourself? The deputy shifted uncomfortably. Those were dismissed. Dismissed or settled out of court? I don't remember. Let me refresh your memory. Aldrich showed him documents. Both were settled. The city paid a total of $45,000 to make them go away. The deputy's credibility crumbled. Holt's final witness was an expert in use of force analysis. He testified that based on the evidence, the deputy's actions on Highway 12 were justified, and that Sarah had overreacted. Aldrich's cross destroyed him. You've never testified for a defendant pro bono, have you? No. How much is Mr. Garrison paying you to be here? $15,000. So you're being paid to support his version of events. I'm being paid for my expertise. Expertise that happens to align perfectly with whoever's signing the check. The trial stretched into its 2nd week. Closing arguments were scheduled for Friday. Thursday night, Graves showed up at the hotel where Sarah was staying. Different location, tighter security. He looked agitated. We've got a situation. Walsh just tried to make a deal. Sarah's pulse jumped. What kind of deal? He's willing to testify against Garrison in exchange for reduced charges. He says he can provide evidence of direct orders, recordings, texts, emails showing Garrison orchestrated everything. That's good, isn't it? It would be. Except Holt is arguing that admitting Walsh's testimony this late violates discovery rules. The judge is considering it. Rebecca arrived minutes later. If Walsh testifies, we win. His insider account corroborates everything we've been saying. And if the judge excludes it, then we're back to he said, she said. With a jury that's been listening to Holt trash our witnesses for 2 weeks. Sarah felt the familiar tightness in her chest, the feeling of victory slipping away just when it seemed closest. The judge's ruling came Friday morning, 30 minutes before closing arguments. Walsh's testimony was admissible. He'd take the stand immediately. Garrison's face went white. Holt objected furiously, but Judge Harmon shut him down. Your client had every opportunity to cooperate earlier, she said. If his co-defendant wants to save himself now, that's his choice. Walsh took the stand looking like a man who'd aged 10 years in 2 weeks. He avoided Garrison's eyes as Aldrich questioned him. Deputy Walsh, did Captain Garrison order you to target Ms. Bennett? Yes. What were his exact words? He said women like her think they're untouchable because of their military service. He said we needed to remind her who runs this county. The courtroom erupted. Judge Harmon banged her gavel. Garrison lunged toward Walsh, and bailiffs had to restrain him. You lying son of a... Mr. Garrison, sit down. Harmon's voice cracked like a whip. Walsh continued, voice shaking. He told us to make the stop look routine, to escalate if she resisted, to make sure she understood what happens when people don't cooperate. And what happens? They get buried. Charges, records, reputation. He said we've done it before and we'd do it again. Aldrich showed him documents, texts between Walsh and Garrison discussing targets, discussing evidence manipulation, discussing how to handle complaints. It was devastating, comprehensive, irrefutable. Holt tried to salvage it on cross, painting Walsh as a desperate man lying to save himself. But the evidence spoke louder than spin. Closing arguments felt almost anticlimactic after that. Aldrich summarized methodically, connecting every piece of evidence into an unbreakable chain. Holt threw everything at the wall, hoping something would stick. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, the forewoman stood. On the charge of civil rights conspiracy, how do you find? Guilty. On the charge of assault under color of law? Guilty. 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 Every count, every charge. Garrison sat frozen as the verdict was read. Sarah watched him, waiting for some reaction, rage, fear, defiance. But he just sat there, finally understanding that his power was gone. Judge Harmon set sentencing for 3 weeks out and remanded Garrison to federal custody pending the hearing. Outside the courthouse, cameras and reporters mobbed Sarah. She gave a brief statement, thanked the prosecutors, thanked the jury, thanked everyone who'd had the courage to come forward. This isn't about revenge, she said. It's about making sure people in power can't hurt people without consequences. Rebecca hugged her. Graves shook her hand. Monica and Frank and Mia stood with her, survivors together. It should have felt like victory. And it did. But as Sarah walked to the car, she saw something that made her blood freeze. A man in the crowd, late 40s, watching her with cold calculation. He wasn't cheering or protesting, just watching. And as Sarah met his eyes, he smiled slightly and touched 2 fingers to his forehead in a mock salute. Then he turned and disappeared into the crowd. Sarah grabbed Graves' arm. Did you see that man? Which one? Gray jacket, just walked away. He was watching me. Graves scanned the crowd. I don't see anyone. Sarah's combat instincts screamed warning. That hadn't been a curious bystander. That had been someone sending a message. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number, text message, Garrison wasn't working alone. See you soon. Sarah showed Graves the text message before they even made it to the car. He read it twice, his expression darkening with each word. We need to get you back into protective custody, now. Rebecca read the message over his shoulder. Garrison wasn't working alone? What does that mean? It means we missed someone, Graves said, already on his phone calling for backup. Someone higher up the chain. Someone who's still out there. They moved Sarah to a different hotel, 4th location in as many weeks. Federal agents swept the room, checked the windows, posted guards outside. Sarah sat on the bed holding her phone, staring at that message like it might reveal something new. Vickers arrived an hour later with her laptop and a grim expression. She sat up at the desk and pulled up files Sarah had seen before. Garrison's personnel records, his financials, his known associates. We assume Garrison was the top, Vickers said. But what if he was middle management? Middle management for what? Sarah asked. That's what we need to figure out. Vickers pulled up bank records. Garrison's been making regular deposits for the past 8 years. Amounts vary, but they're consistent. 5,000 here, 10,000 there. Over time, it adds up to nearly $400,000. Rebecca leaned closer. Where's it coming from? That's the problem. The money's clean by the time it reaches his account, laundered through shell companies and third-party transfers. We've been trying to trace it back, but it's sophisticated. Sarah's mind raced. He was getting paid. Someone was paying him to run his operation. That's our theory. But who? And why? Vickers pulled up another document. I've been looking at the cases Garrison targeted. Most are exactly what they appear to be. Random people he could intimidate. But a few stand out. She showed them a list of names. Sarah recognized some from the trial. Monica, Frank, Mia. Others were unfamiliar. What makes these different? Graves asked. Timing and location. These arrests all happened within 2 weeks of major events at the Clearwater Industrial Complex. Sarah sat up straighter. The manufacturing plant outside Ashford? Right. It's the county's largest employer. About 2,000 workers. They make industrial equipment, heavy machinery, some government contracts. Vickers highlighted specific dates. 3 years ago, the plant had a major safety violation. OSHA was investigating. 2 weeks before inspectors arrived, Garrison arrested an environmental activist passing through town on bogus drug charges. The activist spent a week in jail and missed the window to testify. Rebecca pulled out her legal pad, writing fast. What about the other cases? Similar patterns. A journalist investigating labor practices gets stopped for reckless driving. A former plant worker trying to file a wrongful termination suit gets arrested for assault. A union organizer passing through gets hit with a DUI. Vickers met Sarah's eyes. Every single one of these arrests disrupted something that could have damaged the plant. Sarah felt pieces clicking into place. Someone at the plant was paying Garrison to make problems disappear. That's what it looks like, but we can't prove it yet. Vickers pulled up corporate records. Clearwater Industrial is owned by a holding company called Paramount Holdings, LLC, which is owned by another company, which is owned by another. The trail goes cold after about 6 layers. Graves crossed his arms. Who runs the plant locally? CEO is a man named Richard Stokes. He's been there 12 years. Well-connected politically. Sits on the city council. Major campaign donor. Vickers pulled up a photo. Sarah's breath caught. Gray jacket, late 40s, cold eyes. The man from the courthouse crowd. That's him, Sarah said, voice tight. That's the man who was watching me today. Vickers and Graves exchanged looks. Graves immediately called for additional security, while Vickers started pulling everything she could find on Richard Stokes. The picture that emerged was disturbing. Stokes had arrived in Ashford 13 years ago when Paramount Holdings bought the struggling manufacturing plant. Within 2 years, he'd turned it profitable through aggressive cost-cutting and expansion into government contracts. He'd made himself indispensable to the local economy and the political establishment. He's donated over $3 million to state and local campaigns in the past decade, Vickers said, scrolling through FEC filings. Every county commissioner, the mayor, 2 state senators, even the district attorney, including the DA who initially handled my case, Sarah said quietly. Rebecca nodded. That explains why they were so eager to make you take a plea deal. Stokes wanted you gone quietly. But why target Sarah in the first place? Graves asked. She's a nurse, not a journalist or activist. What threat did she pose? Sarah thought back to that night on Highway 12. She'd been driving home from the hospital after a 14-hour shift. Nothing unusual, nothing that should have triggered law enforcement interest. Unless it wasn't about her at all. What route was I on? Sarah asked suddenly. Vickers pulled up a map. Highway 12, heading west from Ashford toward Kiowa. The plant. I drive past Clearwater Industrial every day on my way home. Sarah stood pacing. What if I wasn't the target? What if I was just convenient? Explain, Graves said. Garrison was running a quota system. Stokes needed a certain number of arrests, charges, disruptions to keep people scared and keep investigators away. I was just another person Garrison thought he could process through the system without consequences. Except you fought back, Rebecca said, and exposed the whole operation. Sarah turned to Vickers. That text message, Garrison wasn't working alone. Stokes is telling me he's still out there, still untouchable, that taking down Garrison doesn't matter because the real power remains. Vickers closed her laptop. Then we prove he's not untouchable. The investigation shifted focus. Vickers brought in financial crime specialists to trace the money flowing to Garrison. Graves coordinated with the Army Criminal Investigation Division to review Clearwater Industrial's government contracts for irregularities. Rebecca started digging through civil cases involving the plant, looking for patterns. Sarah felt sidelined again, watching from hotel rooms while other people did the work. But Graves insisted she stay hidden until they understood the full scope of the threat. Stokes has resources Garrison never had, Graves explained. Private security, legal teams, political protection. If he decides you're a problem that needs permanent solving, he has options we can't easily counter. Sarah hated it, but she understood. She'd survived Garrison by being smarter and tougher. Stokes would require a different strategy. 3 days after the verdict, Vickers called an emergency meeting. She'd found something. They gathered in a secure conference room, Sarah, Rebecca, Graves, Aldrich, and 2 DOJ analysts Sarah hadn't met before. Vickers started without preamble. We traced the payments to Garrison. The money originated from a Cayman Islands account controlled by Paramount Holdings. Over 8 years, they paid Garrison nearly $600,000. Can we prove Stokes authorized the payments? Aldrich asked. Not directly, but we found something better. Vickers pulled up emails. One of our analysts cracked the encryption on files seized from Garrison's home computer. He kept insurance, communications with someone he called RS, discussing specific targets, payment schedules, and operational details. Rebecca leaned forward. RS Richard Stokes. We believe so. The emails reference keeping the factory clean and managing external pressures. They discuss specific individuals by name, the journalist, the union organizer, others. And in one email from 6 months ago, RS writes, "Need to increase activity on Highway 12. Too many people asking questions about transport schedules." Sarah felt electricity run through her. I was stopped 6 months ago on Highway 12. You were stopped because Stokes wanted increased enforcement to discourage anyone paying attention to what the plant was doing. Vickers pulled up more documents. We also found shipping manifests that don't match production records. The plant is manufacturing more than it's reporting to regulators. Manufacturing what? Graves asked. We're not sure yet, but it involves their government contracts. Defense Department procurement, heavily classified. The room went quiet. Sarah understood the implications. If Clearwater Industrial was involved in classified defense work and was hiding production numbers, that meant either fraud or something worse. Aldrich spoke carefully. If this involves classified contracts, DOJ can't touch it without Pentagon approval. That could take months. Or it could get buried entirely if Stokes has the right connections, Rebecca added. Vickers nodded, which is why we need to move fast. I'm recommending we bring Stokes in for questioning before he realizes how much we know. He already knows, Sarah said. That text message was a warning. He was at the courthouse watching. He wanted me to know he's aware and prepared. Graves stood. Then we don't give him time to prepare further. We execute search warrants simultaneously. His home, his office, the plant. We freeze his assets. We bring him in before he can destroy evidence or disappear. We'd need a federal judge to sign off on warrants targeting a major employer and political donor, Aldrich said. That's not a small ask. We have emails linking him to a conspiracy that's already resulted in multiple federal convictions, Vickers countered. We have financial records showing illegal payments. We have a pattern of obstruction. Any judge who sees this evidence will sign. The decision was made. Vickers and Aldrich spent the next 12 hours preparing warrant applications. Graves coordinated with FBI tactical teams. Rebecca worked on legal strategies for potential pushback. Sarah waited in the hotel, watching news coverage of Garrison's conviction. He'd been sentenced that morning, 18 years federal prison, no parole. Walsh got 7 years for cooperating. The other deputies received varying sentences based on their level of involvement. The local news painted it as justice served, corruption exposed, the system working as intended. But Sarah knew better. The system hadn't worked. People had worked despite the system. Victims had spoken up despite fear. Investigators had pushed forward despite resistance. None of it had been easy or inevitable. And it still wasn't over. The raids happened at dawn. Sarah watched from the federal building in Billings as Graves coordinated teams moving on multiple locations. Radio chatter filled the operations center, teams entering Stokes' mansion, his executive office, the plant's administrative wing. Target acquired at residence, came the first report. Richard Stokes in custody. No resistance. Sarah felt satisfaction and wariness in equal measure. No resistance meant Stokes was confident. Confident he had defenses Sarah couldn't see yet. The search teams worked for 6 hours, cataloging computers, files, financial records. They found more encrypted communications, more suspicious transactions, more evidence of the conspiracy. But they also found something else. Vickers pulled Sarah aside late that afternoon. "We have a problem. The classified contracts Stokes was working on. They're legitimate. Pentagon confirmed it. Whatever he was manufacturing, he was authorized to make it." "Then where's the crime?" "That's what we're trying to figure out. The numbers still don't match, which suggests diversion or theft. But without knowing what he's actually producing, we can't prove he's stealing it." Sarah felt frustration rising. "So he walks?" "Not necessarily. We still have the payments to Garrison. We have the conspiracy charges. But the bigger case, the reason he built this network, that's still hidden." Graves entered the room. "Stokes is asking for his lawyer. Marcus Holt." Of course. The same attorney who'd defended Garrison. Sarah wondered if Holt knew what he was getting into, or if he was just following the money. The interrogation lasted 4 hours. Sarah watched through one-way glass as Aldrich and Vickers questioned Stokes. He was calm, almost bored, answering questions with careful precision. "I had no knowledge of any payments to Captain Garrison. The emails suggest otherwise. I don't recognize those emails. My accounts must have been compromised. The payments came from accounts you control. I control many accounts. I can't monitor every transaction." It went on like that. Denials, deflections, plausible deniability. Stokes had clearly prepared for this moment, had rehearsed his answers, had built layers of protection between himself and culpability. Holt sat beside him, occasionally objecting to questions, mostly letting Stokes handle himself. After 4 hours, Aldrich called a break. In the hallway, he looked exhausted. "He's good. Everything we have, he's got an explanation for. The emails could be faked. The payments could be unauthorized. The communications with Garrison could be someone impersonating him." "You don't believe that," Sarah said. "Of course not. But reasonable doubt isn't about what I believe. It's about what we can prove to a jury." Rebecca joined them. "What about the discrepancies in production records? Pentagon won't let us access the classified details without a national security review. That could take 6 months. Sarah felt the case slipping away. They'd come so far, exposed so much, and now the man actually responsible might walk free because he'd insulated himself with money and lawyers and bureaucracy. Then Graves appeared with his phone in hand, expression unreadable. "Sarah, you need to see this." He pulled up a video file, security footage from Clearwater Industrial dated 3 days ago, after Garrison's conviction, but before the raids. The video showed Stokes in what looked like a warehouse section of the plant, talking to 2 men Sarah didn't recognize. No audio, but the body language was clear. Stokes was angry, the other men defensive. Then Stokes handed them something. A thick envelope. One of the men opened it. Even through grainy footage, Sarah could see cash. "We pulled this from the plant's internal security system," Graves said. Stokes didn't know it was cloud-backed and couldn't be deleted from local servers. "Who are the other men?" Sarah asked. "We're identifying them now, but based on their clothing and the location, we think they're plant workers." Graves forwarded the video to Aldrich. "This was recorded 52 hours before our raids. He was paying people off, probably to stay quiet or alter records." Aldrich watched the video 3 times. "This is consciousness of guilt. He knew we were coming and tried to cover his tracks." Vickers smiled grimly. "Get those workers identified and brought in for questioning. If they cooperate, they can testify to what Stokes told them." The workers were identified within 2 hours, shift supervisors both, with access to production records and shipping manifests. FBI agents picked them up at their homes that evening. The first supervisor, a man named Carl Winters, broke almost immediately. Yes, Stokes had paid him $20,000 to alter shipping records. Yes, Stokes had said federal investigators were asking questions. Yes, Stokes had implied there would be consequences if Carl didn't cooperate. The second supervisor held out longer, but ultimately confirmed the same story. With their testimony and the video evidence, Aldrich had enough for additional charges: obstruction of justice, witness tampering, conspiracy to commit fraud. Stokes was rearrested the next morning. This time, when Aldrich walked into the interrogation room, he laid out the new evidence methodically. "We have video of you paying off supervisors. We have their testimony about what you asked them to do. We have altered records that match exactly what they say you wanted changed." Aldrich leaned forward. "Your lawyers can't explain this away." For the first time, Stokes's composure cracked. His jaw tightened. His hands flexed. "I want to make a deal," he said. Holt immediately tried to stop him. "Richard, don't say anything else." But Stokes ignored him. "I'll give you everything: names, dates, financial records, the entire network, but I want immunity." Aldrich sat back. "You're not in a position to demand immunity. I'm in a position to give you something bigger than me. Much bigger." Stokes looked directly at the camera, knowing Sarah was watching. "Garrison was small time. I'm bigger. But I answer to people too. People who make me look like nothing." Vickers entered the room. "Who?" Stokes smiled, a cold, calculated expression. "How badly do you want to know?" The negotiation took 2 days. Stokes' lawyers fought for full immunity. DOJ offered a plea deal with reduced sentencing in exchange for complete cooperation. Eventually, they reached an agreement. Stokes would plead guilty to conspiracy and obstruction charges, receive a 10-year sentence with possibility of parole after 6, and provide everything he knew about the larger network. Sarah sat in Graves' office when the deal was finalized. "I don't like it," she said. "He should get decades, not 10 years. "I agree," Graves said. "But if what he's offering is real, it's worth the trade." Garrison was destroying lives in one county. Stokes' network could be operating in multiple states. The debriefing began immediately. Stokes provided names of officials he'd bribed, dates of payments, details of the manufacturing discrepancies. The classified contracts involved components for military vehicles. He'd been diverting roughly 10% of production and selling it to private contractors at inflated prices. He named 3 other plant managers in different states running similar operations. He provided evidence of political corruption reaching the state legislature and beyond. It was massive, comprehensive, enough to keep federal prosecutors busy for years. But something bothered Sarah. Stokes had given up too easily. Men who built empires didn't collapse at the first real pressure. They fought, they stalled, they protected themselves until the very end. She mentioned it to Rebecca, who agreed. "He's hiding something. The question is what?" The answer came 2 days later. Vickers called Sarah to the federal building urgently. When Sarah arrived, the conference room was full. Aldrich, Graves, Rebecca, and 3 people Sarah didn't recognize in suits that screamed Washington. "Sarah Bennett, this is Deputy Director Harris from the FBI, Assistant Attorney General Morrison, and Colonel Rivera from the Defense Department Inspector General's office." Sarah shook hands, confused. "What's going on?" Harris spoke first. "Ms. Bennett, the information Richard Stokes provided has opened a significant national security investigation. We need your help." "My help with what?" "Stokes claims the network extends beyond industrial fraud. He says Garrison was recruited specifically because of his military background and his willingness to target certain individuals." Harris pulled up files. Individuals who asked questions about Clearwater Industrial's contracts. Individuals who might have noticed irregularities. "Individuals like you." Sarah's blood went cold. "You're saying Garrison stopped me deliberately? Not randomly?" "We're saying it's possible. Stokes claims Garrison received a list of people to monitor. Plant workers, neighbors of the facility, anyone driving routes that passed sensitive areas regularly. Your name was on that list." Rebecca stood abruptly. "Sarah's been under federal protection for weeks. If there's still a threat—" "The threat isn't from Stokes or Garrison," Colonel Rivera interrupted. "It's from whoever gave them the list. Whoever actually runs this network." Morrison leaned forward. "Ms. Bennett, we believe Stokes was telling the truth about answering to someone bigger. But we don't think he told us everything. We think he's protecting whoever that is." "Why would he protect them if he's already cooperating?" "Because they're either powerful enough to hurt him even in federal prison," Harris said, "or he's still hoping they'll get him out." Sarah processed that. "What do you need from me?" "Stokes has requested a meeting with you, private." Just him, you, and attorneys present. He says he'll only tell the rest of the story if he can speak to you directly. Sarah looked around the room. Everyone was watching her, waiting for her response. Why me? He wouldn't say, Morrison replied, but he was insistent. He said you deserved to hear the truth from him personally. It was obviously a trap of some kind. Stokes didn't care about what Sarah deserved. He wanted something, leverage, information, a chance to intimidate or manipulate. But it was also an opportunity. If Stokes would only talk to her, she could get answers nobody else could. I'll do it, Sarah said. Graves objected immediately. That's a bad idea. We don't know what he's planning. He's in federal custody. What can he do? Use you. Threaten you. Try to manipulate you into saying something that helps his appeal. Sarah met his eyes. Then I won't let him. The meeting was scheduled for the next morning in a secure interview room. Sarah arrived early, running through scenarios in her mind. Rebecca and Aldrich would be present. Everything would be recorded. Stokes couldn't actually hurt her, but he could still damage her. Words as weapons, truth as a blade. Stokes entered wearing an orange jumpsuit and handcuffs, looking diminished but not defeated. The guard sat him across from Sarah and stepped back. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. Then Stokes smiled. You have no idea what you've done, do you? Sarah kept her expression neutral, refusing to give Stokes the satisfaction of a reaction. Why don't you tell me what I've done? Stokes leaned back as much as his restraints allowed. You've exposed a 10-year operation that kept this county functional. You've cost hundreds of people their jobs. You've destroyed careers, families, futures, all because you couldn't accept a simple traffic stop. You mean an illegal assault, Sarah said evenly. Semantics. Stokes waved a hand dismissively. Garrison was crude, I'll admit. He enjoyed the power too much, but he was effective. He kept problems contained. He kept people in line. Rebecca spoke up. Mr. Stokes, you requested this meeting to provide additional information. If you're just here to justify your crimes, I'm here because Ms. Bennett deserves to understand the scope of what she's dismantled. Stokes fixed his gaze on Sarah. You think Garrison was the monster. You think I'm the monster. We're not. We're middle management in a system that requires people like us to function. Aldrich leaned forward. Who's above you? Stokes smiled. That's what I'm offering, but first I need Ms. Bennett to understand something. He turned back to Sarah. Do you know why your name was on that list? Sarah felt ice in her veins. Because I drove past your plant. Partially, but there's more. Stokes nodded to his lawyer, who slid a file across the table. 3 months before your arrest, you treated a patient in Clearwater Regional's emergency department, a worker from my plant. He came in with chemical burns. Minor, but concerning. You documented everything. The burns, his employer, his concern that safety equipment wasn't being provided. Sarah remembered. Miguel Rodriguez. Late 20s, nervous, insisting he was fine even though his hands showed clear chemical exposure. You filed a report with OSHA, Stokes continued. Standard procedure, I'm sure, responsible medicine, but that report triggered an inspection. An inspection that would have revealed we were working with classified materials without proper safety protocols. Materials we weren't supposed to have in that facility at all. Sarah's mind raced. You had Miguel stopped? Garrison picked him up 2 days before OSHA arrived. Immigration issues, supposedly. Miguel was so scared he left the state rather than testify. The inspection happened, found nothing, closed the case. Stokes's expression remained cold. And then you became a problem too. A nurse who asked questions, who documented thoroughly, who might notice other irregularities. So you had Garrison target me. I had Garrison monitor you. The traffic stop was his initiative, his overreach. Stokes' tone suggested mild annoyance, like discussing an employee's poor judgment. But it worked out. You were supposed to plead to a minor charge, pay a fine, maybe lose your nursing license for a while, enough to discredit you if you ever tried to report anything else. Sarah felt rage building but kept it controlled. Except I didn't plead. No, you didn't. Stokes actually looked impressed. You fought. You exposed Garrison. You brought in federal investigators. You destroyed everything I built here. He paused. And you still have no idea how much bigger this is. Then tell us, Morrison said from where he stood against the wall. Stokes looked at each person in the room, calculating. I want complete immunity, not a plea deal. Full immunity from all charges in exchange for everything I know. Not happening, Aldrich said immediately. You've already made a deal. Then you'll never know who actually runs this network, who authorized the classified material diversions, who has the political connections to make federal investigations disappear. Stokes met Sarah's eyes. Who's still out there? Still operating? Still targeting people like you? Sarah leaned forward. You're bluffing. If someone that powerful exists, they wouldn't let you sit here offering to expose them. They'd have already silenced you. Would they? I'm in federal custody, cameras everywhere, high-profile case. Killing me would raise too many questions. Stokes smiled. But you, Ms. Bennett, you're not in custody. You're walking around feeling victorious, thinking you've won. How long do you think that lasts once I name names? Rebecca stood abruptly. That's a threat. This meeting is over. But Sarah raised a hand. Wait. She looked at Stokes directly. You didn't ask for this meeting to negotiate immunity. You asked because you're scared. Someone above you is powerful enough that even in prison, even cooperating with DOJ, you're not safe. And you think if you tell me who they are, I'll somehow protect you. Stokes' smile faltered slightly. Sarah continued. You're hoping I'll crusade against them the way I crusaded against Garrison, that I'll expose them and take the heat off you. But here's what you don't understand. I'm done being your pawn. I'm done letting people like you manipulate me. Then you're done, period, Stokes said quietly. Because they'll come for you anyway. The moment they realize you're not going to back down, you're a problem to solve. Who? Morrison demanded. Give us a name. Stokes looked at Sarah one more time, searching for something. Fear, weakness, leverage. He found none of it. Senator Catherine Brennan, he said finally. Senior senator from Montana, chair of the Armed Services Committee. She's been running this operation for 12 years. The room went silent. Even the guards reacted, subtle shifts in posture suggesting they understood the magnitude of what had just been said. Morrison recovered first. That's an extraordinary accusation. You better have evidence. I have everything. Emails, financial records, meeting notes. She's the one who authorized the classified material diversions. She's the one who built the network of local officials to protect the operation. She's the one who has the power to make problems disappear. Stokes' hands shook slightly. And she's the one who'll destroy anyone who threatens her. Aldrich was already on his phone, stepping out of the room. Morrison followed. Harris stayed, watching Stokes carefully. Sarah felt the weight of it settling. A U.S. senator. Someone with real power, real resources, real connections at the highest levels. Garrison and Stokes had been dangerous. This was something else entirely. Rebecca spoke quietly. Sarah, we need to get you somewhere extremely secure. She's already in federal protective custody, Harris said. That won't be enough. Not for this. Rebecca's face had gone pale. If Stokes is telling the truth, we're talking about someone who can access classified operations, who has Pentagon connections, who sits on intelligence committees. She'll know where Sarah is before we can move her. Stokes nodded slowly. Now you understand. I'm not the monster. I'm just the one who got caught. Senator Brennan is still out there, still protected, still untouchable. Nobody's untouchable, Sarah said. Stokes laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. You really believe that? After everything? Ms. Bennett, you took down a county police captain and a plant manager. Congratulations. But Catherine Brennan is a third-term senator with presidential ambitions. She has friends in every agency that might investigate her. She has leverage on people who could expose her. She's been building her defenses for over a decade while you were fighting in Afghanistan and working night shifts. Sarah stood. Then it's time she met someone who doesn't scare easily. The debriefing lasted 6 hours. Stokes provided documentation, encrypted files on a secure server, account numbers, communication logs. FBI analysts started verifying everything immediately. Senator Brennan had indeed been the architect. She'd identified struggling manufacturing facilities in key districts and organized their acquisition through shell companies. She'd recruited local officials to protect operations and eliminate threats. She'd diverted military equipment for sale to private contractors, pocketing millions while maintaining her image as a national security hawk. The evidence was comprehensive, damning, and terrifying in scope. Morrison coordinated with Washington. The investigation would be handled by a special prosecutor, insulated from political interference. Warrants would be prepared. assets would be frozen. But it would take time, weeks minimum, possibly months. Meanwhile, Sarah remained in protective custody while federal agents debated how to keep her safe from someone with Senator Brennan's resources. The answer came from an unexpected source. Major Graves appeared at Sarah's hotel room late that night with Colonel Rivera and another officer Sarah didn't recognize, a woman in her 50s with stars on her uniform. Ms. Bennett, this is General Patricia Hammond, Judge Advocate General's Corps. She has a proposal. General Hammond sat across from Sarah with the bearing of someone used to making decisions that affected thousands. Ms. Bennett, your situation is unique. You're a civilian victim of a criminal conspiracy that involves active military contracts and classified materials. That puts you in a gray area jurisdictionally. Meaning what? Sarah asked. Meaning we can offer you protection that civilian agencies can't. If you're willing to be temporarily reactivated from the individual ready reserve, you become a military asset. You'd be stationed at a secure facility where Senator Brennan's civilian connections can't reach you. You'd be under military jurisdiction and military protection until this investigation concludes. Sarah looked at Graves, who nodded slightly. It's a good option. Better than anything DOJ can provide. For how long? However long it takes to build the case against Brennan and neutralize the threat she represents, General Hammond said. Could be months? Could be longer? Sarah thought about it. Going back into military structure, even temporarily. Following orders again. Being protected, but also confined. What happens after? She asked. When the investigation ends. You're released from reactivation, return to civilian life, and hopefully testify against everyone involved. Hammond's expression softened slightly. I've read your service jacket, Ms. Bennett. You're exactly the kind of soldier we need more of. Principled, courageous, unwilling to compromise. The Army failed you by not supporting you sooner. This is our chance to correct that. Sarah made her decision. When do we start? The reactivation happened within 48 hours. Sarah was transferred to Fort Harrison in Helena, Montana, far enough from Ashford to provide distance, secure enough to prevent infiltration. She was assigned to the base medical facility, ostensibly as a nurse but really as a protected witness in residence. The adjustment was strange. She'd been civilian for 6 years, had built a life outside military structure. Now she was back to formations, uniforms, military time. But it also felt oddly safe. Clear rules, defined hierarchies, threats that came from outside the wire rather than from people who were supposed to protect you. Rebecca visited weekly, updating Sarah on the investigation's progress. Federal prosecutors were building cases against 17 officials in Brennan's network. 3 had already flipped and were cooperating. 2 had disappeared, presumably warned by Brennan that prosecution was coming. What about Brennan herself? Sarah asked during one visit. She's still in Washington, still voting, still giving interviews about national security. Rebecca's frustration was obvious. She knows we're investigating, but she's acting like she's untouchable. Her lawyers are already preparing defenses. What kind of defenses? The usual. She was misled by subordinates. She had no direct knowledge of wrongdoing. Any evidence against her is circumstantial or fabricated. Rebecca sighed. Sarah, I need you to prepare for the possibility that she walks. People with that much power, that many connections. Sometimes the system protects them. Sarah had heard that before. From people who thought Garrison was untouchable. From people who thought Stokes couldn't be brought down. She'd proven them wrong. She'd prove them wrong again. The breakthrough came 3 months into Sarah's reactivation. One of Brennan's former chiefs of staff, facing his own federal charges, provided the final piece, direct emails showing Brennan ordering specific actions, not requests or suggestions. Orders. Documented proof she'd knowingly directed criminal activity. With that evidence, the special prosecutor moved. Arrest warrants were issued. Federal marshals coordinated with Capitol Police. Sarah watched it on the news from Fort Harrison's common area. Senator Catherine Brennan, surrounded by cameras and reporters, being led from her office in handcuffs. Her expression wasn't fear or shock. It was rage, pure, barely controlled fury at being publicly humiliated. She knew how Sarah had felt, sitting in that county jail cell while deputies gloated. The trial took 8 months to prepare. Sarah remained on active duty during that time, working in Fort Harrison's emergency department and preparing her testimony. She treated soldiers with combat injuries, civilians with medical emergencies, reminded herself why she'd become a nurse in the first place. When the trial finally began, it happened in federal court in Washington, D.C. Sarah flew in under military escort, stayed in a secured facility, and took the stand wearing her Army uniform rather than civilian clothes. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. Here was a decorated combat medic targeted by a corrupt senators network, testifying in the same uniform she'd worn serving her country. Brennan's defense team tried everything. They attacked Sarah's credibility, questioned her motives, suggested she was seeking attention or money. But the evidence was overwhelming. Emails, financial records, testimony from cooperating witnesses, the money trail leading directly to Brennan. The jury deliberated for 3 days. When they returned, guilty verdicts came on every count. Brennan showed no emotion as the verdict was read. But Sarah noticed her hands trembling slightly, the first crack in her armor. Sentencing came 2 months later. Federal guidelines suggested 20 to 30 years. The judge gave her 25, citing the extraordinary betrayal of public trust and systematic exploitation of power for personal gain. Sarah attended the sentencing remotely, watching via secure video from Fort Harrison. When it was over, she felt something release in her chest. Not quite relief, not quite satisfaction, more like completion. She'd started this journey as a victim. She was ending it as someone who'd brought down an entire criminal network from the county level to the U.S. Senate. General Hammond called her to headquarters the next day. The threats neutralized. You're clear to return to civilian life whenever you're ready. Sarah had been thinking about this moment for months. What came next? Where she went from here? I'd like to stay active duty, she said. Not forever, but I'm not ready to go back to Ashford yet. Hammond nodded. We can extend your assignment. How long? A year, maybe 2. Time to figure out what I want. Sounds reasonable. Hammond pulled out a folder. There's something else. The Judge Advocate General's office has been reviewing cases of service members who faced similar situations, targeted by corruption, forced to fight systems that should have protected them. We're creating a task force to identify and support those cases. We want you to be part of it. Sarah looked at the folder. Inside were stories like hers, soldiers and veterans who'd encountered corruption and had nowhere to turn. What would my role be? Advocate. Investigator. Someone who understands what it's like to fight from the bottom up. Someone who won't quit when systems push back. Hammond met her eyes. You've proven you can't be broken, Ms. Bennett. Help us find others who have that same strength and give them the support you never had. Sarah thought about Monica Reeves, terrified but testifying anyway. About David Kern, who'd backed out because fear overwhelmed courage. About Frank Delgado and Mia Howell, who'd found their voices because Sarah had found hers first. I'll do it, she said. The year that followed was harder than any combat deployment Sarah had experienced. She investigated cases of corruption, abuse, and systemic failure across military and civilian systems. She testified before congressional committees about needed reforms. She helped create protocols for protecting whistleblowers and supporting victims. She made enemies, officials who didn't appreciate scrutiny, commanders who preferred problems stayed buried, politicians who saw her advocacy as inconvenient. She didn't care. 18 months after Brennan's conviction, Sarah finally returned to Ashford. Not to stay, but to close a chapter. Clearwater Regional Hospital had reached out months earlier asking if she'd come back. Dr. Ortega had retired but left a message saying Sarah's job was waiting whenever she wanted it. Sarah walked into the hospital on a Tuesday morning, different than when she'd left. Older, harder in some ways, but also more certain of who she was and what she stood for. The staff treated her carefully at first, unsure how to approach someone who'd become semi-famous for taking down a senator. But within a few shifts, she was just Sarah again. The nurse who stayed late, who advocated for patients, who didn't back down when something wasn't right. She ran into Monica Reeves at a coffee shop 6 months later. Monica had moved back to Ashford after the trials ended, reclaimed her life, found work at a local nonprofit. How are you doing? Sarah asked. Better. Therapy helps. Knowing those people can't hurt me anymore helps. Monica smiled. I heard you're working with JAG now, helping other people who went through what we did. Trying to. That's good. That's really good. Monica hesitated. I wanted to thank you for not giving up, for fighting when the rest of us couldn't. Sarah shook her head. You fought too. You testified when it mattered. You didn't let them silence you. Only because you showed me it was possible. They talked for an hour, comparing notes on recovery, on moving forward, on building lives after trauma. When they parted, Sarah felt something she hadn't felt in years. Connection. Not to the fighting or the victory, but to another person who'd survived the same darkness. That evening, Sarah drove past the spot on Highway 12 where Garrison had pulled her over. The roadside looked the same. Gravel shoulder, empty highway, Montana sky stretching to the horizon. But Sarah was different. She'd been tested by systems designed to break her, and she'd refused to break. She'd been targeted by people who thought power made them untouchable, and she'd proven them wrong. She pulled over at the exact spot where it had started, stood on the shoulder where Garrison had shoved her against her SUV, looked at the pavement where deputies had ended up groaning because they'd underestimated who they were attacking. Her phone buzzed. A message from Graves. New case just came in. Service member in Texas, targeted by corrupt local PD. Sounds familiar. You interested? Sarah looked at the message, then at the highway, then at the mountains beyond the highway, then at the mountains beyond. She'd spent months angry, months scared, months fighting just to survive. But somewhere in that struggle, she'd found something unexpected. Purpose. Not the purpose she'd planned, not the quiet nursing career she'd envisioned, but purpose nonetheless. She texted back, "Send me the details." 6 weeks later, Sarah stood in a courtroom in El Paso, Texas, watching another victim tell their story. Another person who'd been targeted, abused, threatened by people who thought authority made them immune to consequences. Sarah sat behind them, visible in their peripheral vision. A reminder they weren't alone, that someone had fought this fight before and won. When the victim's voice shook with fear, Sarah leaned forward slightly. The victim saw the movement, met her eyes, and found strength in that moment of connection. The testimony continued, stronger, clearer. Afterward, the victim approached Sarah in the hallway. How did you do it? How did you keep going when everything was against you? Sarah thought about that question, about all the moments she'd wanted to quit, all the times the pressure had seemed overwhelming, all the nights she'd questioned whether fighting was worth it. I stopped waiting for the system to save me, Sarah said. I decided to save myself, and once I made that choice, nothing could stop me. The victim nodded slowly, absorbing that. Sarah continued, People in power count on your silence. They count on your fear. They count on you believing you're powerless. She met the victim's eyes directly. But you're not. You never were. They just convinced you that you were. 3 months later, that case ended in convictions. Sarah moved to the next one, then the next. Years passed. The work never ended. Corruption existed in every system, every institution, every level of power. But Sarah kept finding people willing to fight it, people who refused to stay silent, people who understood that real power didn't come from authority or position. It came from refusing to be broken. She never went back to Ashford permanently. The town held too many ghosts, too many memories of who she'd been before. Instead, she traveled, investigating cases, supporting victims, testifying when needed. General Hammond promoted her to captain after 4 years of active duty. Rebecca continued representing victims in civilian courts, working parallel to Sarah's military cases. They became a team, civilian and military advocacy, synchronized and effective. Graves eventually retired from CID and joined their operation as an investigator. Together, they built something that hadn't existed before, a network of people who'd survived corruption and were using that experience to protect others. 10 years after that traffic stop on Highway 12, Sarah stood in the JAG headquarters in Washington, D.C., briefing a room full of officials on systemic corruption patterns. She wore her uniform with captain's bars, ribbons from her combat deployments, and her advocacy work both. After the briefing, a young lieutenant approached her. "Ma'am, I read about your case, about what you went through. It's why I joined JAG. I wanted to help people the way you were helped." Sarah smiled. "I wasn't helped. Not really. Not until I started helping myself." "But people supported you. Federal agents, prosecutors, other victims." "They did, after I made the choice to fight." Sarah looked at the lieutenant carefully. "That's the lesson. Nobody's coming to save you. You have to save yourself. But once you start fighting, you'll find you're not alone. Other people are fighting too. They're just waiting for someone to go first. The lieutenant nodded, understanding dawning. Sarah left the briefing and walked out into Washington sunlight. Her phone showed messages from 3 new cases, all people who'd contacted the task force looking for help, looking for support, looking for someone who'd been through hell and survived it. She answered each message with the same basic information. We believe you. We'll investigate. You're not alone, because that's what had changed her trajectory. Not the federal agents or the prosecutors or the justice system. Those had helped, eventually. But the real turning point had been the moment Sarah decided she wasn't going to be a victim anymore. Everything else had followed from that choice. She thought about Garrison sometimes, about Walsh and Stokes and Brennan, about all the people who tried to destroy her because they thought she was weak, powerless, forgettable. They were all in federal prison now, stripped of authority, stripped of power, stripped of the systems that had protected them. And Sarah was still standing, still fighting, still refusing to be silent. That evening, she sat in her apartment, a small place near Fort Meade where she was currently stationed, and wrote an email to Monica Reeves. They'd stayed in touch over the years, occasional messages checking in, sharing victories and setbacks. Another case closed today. Former Army specialist targeted by corrupt sheriff's department in Arizona. She fought back. We helped. Justice served. Thinking about how far we've come from that courtroom in Billings. Hope you're well. Monica's response came an hour later. Proud of you, proud of us. We survived what was supposed to destroy us. Never forget how strong that makes us. Sarah read the message twice, then closed her laptop. She walked to her window and looked out at the Maryland night. Somewhere out there, someone was being targeted by corrupt officials. Someone was fighting systems designed to break them. Someone was making the choice Sarah had made, to fight instead of fold. And tomorrow, or next week, or next month, that person would reach out for help. They'd find Sarah's task force. They'd discover they weren't alone. The fight would continue. It always would. Power corrupted. Systems failed. People in authority abused their positions, but people like Sarah existed too. People who'd been tested and refused to break. People who understood that real strength wasn't about physical power or authority. It was about the decision to keep standing when everything was trying to push you down. Sarah had been a nurse, a soldier, a victim, and a fighter. She'd been underestimated, targeted, assaulted, and nearly destroyed. And she'd survived all of it by making one fundamental choice. She refused to be silent. That choice had cost her comfort, safety, the quiet life she'd once imagined. But it had given her something more valuable, purpose. The knowledge that her pain had meaning, that her struggle had protected others. She thought about the young woman on Highway 12, terrified and alone, facing down deputies who thought she was powerless. That woman didn't exist anymore. She'd been forged into something harder, something stronger, something that couldn't be broken by systems or power or fear. Sarah Bennett had learned the most important lesson anyone could learn. You're only powerless if you accept that you are. And she'd never accepted it. Not once. Not ever. She turned from the window, pulled up the 3 new case files on her laptop, and started reading. There was work to do. There was always work to do. But that was fine. Sarah was built for this fight. She'd proven it over and over, and she'd keep proving it, case by case, victim by victim, until the day she couldn't fight anymore. Because people in power counted on silence. They counted on fear. They counted on victims staying broken. Sarah Bennett had spent 10 years teaching them that sometimes the people they targeted fought back. And when they did, everything changed.